in grade 2, I remember that I started off in this is when we started having different levels of reading groups. Um, and I started in the lowest reading group, and I was doing all right, but I kind of knew some more things than some of my other classmates at that point. There was one point that I clearly remember where we were learning about past tense words, about how you add ed, and there was a boy in my class who would pronounce them as ed. Like, we would say inspired, and he would say inspired, and it would drive me crazy because I was like, that's not right, that's not how you do it. But by the end of second grade, I was reading the chapter books. I had moved up a reading group level, and into third grade, I was in the highest reading group. And I remember we were reading the book Tuck Everlasting, and we were getting towards the end of it, and we only had one or two chapters left. And during our reading time, we were only supposed to read so many chapters.
Mhm.
I read the two chapters I was supposed to read, and there was like one or two chapters left in the book, and I still had more time. So I just kept reading, and I finished the book, and I went to my teacher and was like, "Oh, I finished it." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, I wanted to know what happened." And then I remember there was a discussion about possibly moving me to the fourth grade reading group because
But
I
wait,
had
you're in
finished
second
that
grade. How can a
third.
second grader, oh, third grade, how can a third grader go to the fourth grade reading group?
I had the skills to. I
Right.
had the skills at that point to be able to read, and I learned that I loved reading.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dyslexia Success Stories. And this one is very personal because today I'm going to be interviewing my youngest child, my daughter Chloe, who at the end of first grade, her very caring, very dedicated private school principal and first grade teacher at our very last parent teacher meeting. I'm kind of an involved father in education. It's kind of important to me. Um, Told me that she was not ready for second grade. And so we're going to jump in and just start talking about that. And we're going to share some interesting parent perspectives. Me as a neuropsychologist, peer reviewed scientist in dyslexia prevention, peer reviewed in dyslexia remediation, peer review published in phonological alexia rehabilitation, more than just a small amount of expertise in literacy, language, and dyslexia. Finding myself in the position that I had counseled 1,000+ parents in as well, where they really didn't feel like the child was ready to go on, and they thought retention was the best option. So I'm going to bring online Chloe, and we'll just have a good chat about what it's like to be a child growing up with dyslexia that wasn't identified, and then you happen to have parents who have a lot of expertise in dyslexia. Afternoon, Chloe Ellen.
Hi,
How are you today?
I'm good.
And you've got the very bright and colorful Afromov painting in the background. For those of you who don't know, Leonid Afromov, or the late Leonid Afromov, was a palette knife painter. And Chloe's grandfather, my dad, was also a palette knife painter. So that's just a memorable piece of family artwork and history. And we're going to talk about brain camp to occupational therapist. And to help people understand what that means, the Morris Center is a medical clinic. It's all healthcare professionals. There's speech pathology, there's OT, there's psychologists or neuropsychologists, there's educators. Sometimes there's consulting, developmental behavioral pediatricians or psychiatry. And it's a very complex team of healthcare providers. But summertime, we run a camp called Brain Camp. And it's a way to help families have access to this high-powered team services, but not really having to pay for speech, not having to pay for OT. You can just get a package program. The Morris Center in Ponte Vedra Beach has a brain camp running this summer. The Morris Center in Ocala has a brain camp running this summer. And I believe the Morris Center in Trinidad and Tobago, it's in its 9th year. It actually also has a brain camp happening this summer. And the pricing runs anywhere from about, I think the low is about $250 a week, all the way up to $500 a week. And just so full disclosure, pricing is really only dictated by the cost of operations of the clinic. And certainly Trinidad is our lowest cost operation. Ocala is the second higher cost. And outside of Jacksonville and Ponte Vedra Beach, that's the higher cost therapy service. But believe it or not, the services are actually the same across all three clinics. So, Chloe, let's jump back to early childhood.
Hmm.
Today, you have a father who's a neuropsychologist, neurorehabilitation, neurodevelopmental specialist, and today your mother's now a speech pathologist. She wasn't back then, but that's her current profession. But she still had a lot of expertise in language too, because she worked at the Morris Center Clinic as one of the instructors and had early exposure and experience there. What's your earliest experience of school? And I need to preface this by saying I'm not a huge proponent of throwing kids in school right away, but at age 4, is that right? 4, 5? Age
Four.
4, yeah, at
I
age
I
yeah,
turned 4 a month into preschool.
that's right. So at age 4, the private school her brother's attending came to us and said, "We've decided to open a preschool, and we'd really like Chloe to join the preschool." And we're like, "Yeah, but she's like 4." But she wanted to go. She thought it'd be fun and be cool. My parents thought, "Well, can't hurt." So she started
It's easier to
preschool.
take 2 kids to one place than 2 kids to 2 different places.
Exactly, parent functionality. What's your earliest recollection of school when you started at age 4?
Um, at age 4, I remember we didn't do a lot of, like, reading, language stuff in preschool,
Yeah.
but, um, I believe we did some sign language. I had a classmate whose mom was fluent in sign language, and I remember she would come in and she taught us some of the signs, and so I knew, and I already learned as a baby from you guys doing sign with your baby, some signs.
Let me jump in and say this. Yeah, we should mention that to anybody watching who's a parent who has a child 6 months or close to 6 months of age. You absolutely want to get a good child-focused sign language program. Joseph Garcia has an older one called Sign with Your Baby, and because children can actually comprehend language before they can actually speak. And so if you say you want some milk, and you give a sign, you say you want a cookie and give them a sign there, or, you say you want to eat, or you say you want some more, kids will start communicating back to you as young as 6, 7, and 8 months of age. But most kids don't speak and babble until about somewhere around 12 to 16 months of age. So in about 2 to 3 months, you can get about 50 signs going with your child, and you're still speaking. Because Chloe's grandmother was a very supportive woman. She messaged us, or sorry, we checked on the phone, and she said, "That's lovely. You're doing sign language with the children, but why aren't you speaking to the children?" I'm like, no, 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 no. You're doing sign and speech together, and that just helps advance that language skill, helps improve expressive language skills, and it has a better chance of decreasing what they call the terrible twos, because the child's less frustrated, can actually communicate with you. So anybody who's watching this, if you have grandchildren coming up of age, or you're going to have your own child soon, or you have a 4 month old, or you got to already have an 8 month old, absolutely consider starting sign language right away. It has a tremendous positive benefits. And so you're right, Chloe, you'd already had sign language as a child from very young.
And I
Yeah.
still know some of the signs, and they're very useful for when you're an adult too, and you're out somewhere or socializing, and I want to tell my mom that we need to go get some food. I'm hungry. I can
Mhm.
tell her, hey, food, more food, please. Um, so
How about kindergarten? Any recollection of what it was
kindergarten,
like being in kindergarten? There you start to get into letters, and usually in the
yes.
States, they're starting to be a little bit more early literacy focused. Any recollections of what it was like in kindergarten?
I remember there was a alphabet up on the wall up above the
Mhm.
whiteboard, and it was like it had like A with an alligator, B with a bumblebee, whatever. um I remember seeing that, and we were learning our letters, and I could kind of get some of them, but I definitely could not recite the alphabet. And the other thing I remember as well is that I had a really hard time with numbers.
Mhm.
Um, I remember my kindergarten teacher was actually pregnant, and one of the numbers I had a hard time writing was 5. I would drop the round part, and so she
Mhm.
was like, it's pregnant, give it a belly, it needs a belly." Um, but it wasn't really until 1st grade that I think I really, noticed that there was something that I wasn't quite getting, we would do spelling words each week, and we'd have like 10 spelling words, and we would go through them on Monday, what they were, how they were spelled, what they meant. And the teacher, when we were talking about what they meant, the teacher would ask us to give a sentence with the word. And I had a friend in my class who she would just make the most beautiful sentences to me. I would just sit there in awe, like, oh my gosh, how did she do that? I had no idea how she was doing that. Um, I could not.
Mhm.
It would take me a very long time. I would have to sit there and pick like one word and then sit there for the entirety while they're doing the other words and think of a sentence for it if I wanted to give one. And so I don't think I did give many sentences because that took a lot of brain power and attention. And I'm also needing to learn what the other words are for the
Mhm.
spelling test.
Gotcha. And so for the viewers as well, just a point of clarification too, part of what you're describing is what we call expressive language skills. How well can you get the words out? And many times people ask, well, do all people with dyslexia have expressive language difficulty? And the answer is no. Not everyone who has dyslexia has trouble getting their words out and explaining things, because the brain's got two main systems that drive your expressive language skills. One system is more focused on the content, focused on the concept, focused on the structure, and usually it's driven more by imagery. It's more of a right hemisphere system where can you picture what you want to say, and then from that picture put it into words. The other system is more on the left hemisphere side of the brain. It's that sound-based system. It's that phonological system. It helps you. You might think of, I want to talk about the animals I saw in the pond. And so the brain goes to the pond image and it's thinking of pond animals in that conceptual system. But to get the right name for the right animal, that phonological system has to kick in and be able to pick out, wait, was it duck? Was it duckling? Was it goose? Was it swan? And so then you got to get the phonological system to help you get to the exact word to talk about what's happening. So while we know most everyone with dyslexia has weaker phonological processing, or they may have difficulty in applying the phonological skill to the act of reading. I want to clarify that because some folks will say, oh, look, this child's CTOP scores are fine. They don't have any phonological deficits. Well, you can score fine on a phonological measure, but that doesn't mean you've actually known how to use the phonological skill for reading and spelling. So as a neuropsych, you're measuring each level of function, measure the phonological skills, and then look and see and how well do they sound out words. If the phonological testing says, yeah, that skill's strong, but the sounding out words testing says, yeah, that's really weak, then we've got a gap in the application of phonological awareness, how to use it. So it's interesting. Then you recall spoken language was not your strength, not easy to do.
Mhm.
And as her father, I can tell you what we knew to be different of child number 2 versus child number 1 was if they got in trouble for acting up and they were made a poor choice and one kid slugged the other kid or one kid took the other kid's toy, we learned that if we used that 1, 2, 3, 1, go to the corner, 2, go to the corner with your brother, he would calm down and go to the corner, sit in timeout and chill out. If we did that with you, each number we said, your anger got larger. So if we said 1, oh boy, you start getting red. We said 2, you're even redder. And 3, you're like furious because you wanted a chance to explain what had happened. And it didn't come easily to you. And that we didn't pick up on that right away as that was a language issue. We just look at, she just needs a little chance to talk it out. If you told it to us and said, he took the toy first, you just saw me take it second, then we say, okay, but you can't take toys. Go sit in the corner, think about it. Excuse me, come up with a better option. Then you'd be okay. You could do it. But now we know it may have been secondary to it was not easy to find the words to tell us what had happened.
Mhm.
So kindergarten, expressive language, is it something you picked up on?
First
Letters,
grade.
learning letters, something you picked up. Oh, sorry, first grade. Kindergarten, first grade.
Kindergarten picked up on letters. First
Letters.
grade was struggling with expressive
With the
language.
sentences. Okay, gotcha.
Mhm.
And some people might say to me, okay, well, you're a neuropsychologist. Why didn't you test your child? Why didn't you make sure and do early intervention? Well, I wasn't trying to build superpowered kids. My view of it, let's let things develop. Let's see how things go. If we see any difficulties, we kind of know what to do to help build it. And we know that in my family, on my side of the family, dyslexia doesn't run in the family, it gallops. There's tons of people on my side of the family with dyslexia, including myself. So we're like, we'll just wait and see what happens. So there weren't any big signs for us. Nobody told us as your parents that something was difficult for you in pre-K. Nobody talked about any difficulties in kindergarten. First grade, we checked in during the parent-teacher meetings all along. Never really got any report about any struggles, even though later on we learned that on standardized testing, your visual motor skills were a deficit area. There's some things you struggled with. There were some other aspects of occupational therapy that you struggled with that weren't aware to us as your parents, and your teachers hadn't picked up on it either. But tell us about learning to read in first grade. What do you remember about the reading activities? Because you guys had books, right?
Yes, we had reading buddies in first grade. My private school was elementary and middle school, and they did a thing with first grade, and they eventually transitioned to first grade and kindergarten, where the eighth graders would be assigned a student in first grade or kindergarten, and there was a specific time where they would come to our class and they would sit with us, and we would get to pick a book and we would read it to them or with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember doing that. I don't remember struggling with it too much. Um, I don't the only really memory I have of having a hard time is with the expressive language. Um, Otherwise, I didn't notice too much of reading issues in first grade. I didn't know that I was behind because I was 6. I
Right.
wasn't aware that I had a problem.
So there wasn't the yellow book group and the green book group and the red book group, because some kids
Mm-mm.
talk about that, knowing that how come I'm always getting the yellow books, which are like the really simple ones, and my classmates are getting the blue or green books, which are harder ones. So no overt or no obvious sign that your reading level wasn't the same as the other kids.
Mhm.
Okay. So then at the end of the school year, we're there meeting with your principal and the first grade teacher, which is unusual because the principal didn't always come to the parent teacher meeting. But in this one, they did. And here's the famous phrase that I've told people thousands of times, because I've counseled thousands of parents on: if the school tries to retain your child, all the research advocates against that, unless the school is going to do something different. You're going to get a different intervention or a new program, because the way the brain works, same practice is pretty much going to build the same skills. And just because you're a year older doesn't mean the brain's going to benefit more from that practice. And the analogy I try to give to folks to really think about is that, okay, the brain hasn't matured yet. She will do better next year with the same instruction when the brain is more mature. Well, if the brain just got better because you got older, just like age over time, then we could say that all 50-year-old men are perfectly mature and competent and capable of functioning and making good choices. And we could say that about women too, as the analogy. But the point is, that's not true. It's not age over time that gives the brain new functions, new skills, new abilities. It's actual experience and practice and building those skills over time that builds new wiring. So your principal said to me, Chloe's not ready for second grade. And I was a little taken aback because I had been to all the parent teacher meetings and all I'd heard was fine, fine, fine. Lovely girl, doing just fine. Joy to have in class. And he said, yeah. And I said, really, why would we not pass Chloe to second grade? He's like, well, she doesn't read well. I'm like, oh, just keeping that in the back of my head. And he's like, I said, okay, well, what else? What other concerns do you have about Chloe? She's not reading well in first grade. He says, no, that's it. He says, you got to understand, for some kids, reading clicks later, and other kids, reading clicks earlier. And I had to think in my head really quickly on the fly because I don't want to offend anybody and I don't want to be, confrontational. So I tried to figure out, how do I explain to this principal that there's no anatomy model of the brain, no neuroanatomy. And I have anatomy stuff books back here. There's no neuroanatomy book that has a piece of the brain called the click. And there's no neuropsychology, brain processing, brain functioning book. And I have neuropsychology books back here that describes the process of the brain clicking. So the fastest response I could think of that seemed respectful, but also pointed out there might be something flawed in the thinking there, is I said to him, there is actually no part of the brain we call the click and there's no part of brain function we call clicking. So what you're describing to me is that you realize she's not reading well and you're not sure why. So my response was, no problem. Her mother and I have a bit of expertise in this area. I'm a peer-reviewed published brain scientist, and by that time, we had done 15 years of dyslexia prevention research and 15 years that also included dyslexia remediation research. So we had no doubts about what needed to happen to change your ability to read at your IQ level. And so after I responded that to him, you had this lovely first grade teacher, Miss Debbie. She had been a teacher for 20 years. And she said, look,
Mhm.
you need to listen to him. He's been a principal for 30 years. I've been a first grade teacher for 20 years. It's true. For some kids, reading just clicks later. And it hasn't clicked for Chloe. And so without going into a big neuropsychology, evidence-based, peer-reviewed research discussion, I said, well, I understand that. I respect your opinion. I'm sure that's what you've seen on your experience, but we have published research that shows how to change these skills, change it very quickly. So here's our choice. We want to take Chloe and put her in the second grade next year. She's going to come to Brain Camp at the Morris Center this summer. And we're going to rebuild those skills and shore them up, or we're going to use her. Her cousin was actually also trained in the dyslexia intervention. Some way we'll figure out a way to get her some of that empowered program that today we call the Now Foundations for Speech, Language, Reading, and Spelling program by that ed tech company I run called Now Programs. And they thought I had 3 heads and I was just crazy. And I thought they had 3 heads and they were just crazy. So here we are not really communicating well. And they pushed back again. And I asked them, have you read the research on retention? Do you know that 60% of kids who get retained do not finish high school? And we think part of the contributing factor is it really has a big hit on many people's self-esteem. When they see their friends go to the next grade and they stay back, it makes them feel like, oh, I must not be as smart. I mean, I must be less intelligent, or I'm just not as good as they are. And so I even had offered to bring some of the research studies to them to see them. And they're like, no, we don't need to see that. So we came down to one point of contention. Do you know what I had to say to them to convince them to put you in second grade?
I believe you told them that either I was going to go to second grade or I was going to go to a different school.
Yeah, I said, let's talk money. I will take my tuition money and my child and put her in second grade someplace else, or we will put her in second grade here at your school. The choice is yours. And Trinities have a term for this. It's a really very explicit term that really hits the nail on the head. And the principal and the teacher, they were vexed. And vexed just means they were not happy. They were frustrated. All the other, consternational terms you can think of, that's what they were feeling. And you could see it on their face. And I think they just kind of begrudgingly agreed. And then they knew that they were going to prove me wrong in the fall. And so they said, okay, fine. We'll let her try second grade. And so do you have any recollection about what happened over the summertime with these crazy pictures of the mouth and these crazy words like lip popper and tongue tapper and tongue scraper? How much memory do you have of that? Because I had that when I was 5. Back then, that was the Lindemoods early program. And it was my mother that was putting me through the Lindemoods program. And I have very vague recollections of seeing these really not very well done black and white drawings of the mouth. Do you have any recollections of what you did?
I don't remember the pictures exactly. I remember going to my cousin's house in the afternoon, um, uh, and doing the mouth movements and learning the names of the different mouth pictures and the sounds with her,
Mhm.
and um, eventually moving to being at the Morris Center and doing the program there during the summer, because I think maybe I still had a couple more weeks of school or something when you had that meeting, and so you decided to just go ahead and have me start seeing my cousin,
Mhm.
um, and then have me start at the Morris Center full time in the summer, for Brain Camp.
Mhm.
And I do remember being there at the Morris Center and doing more mouth pictures and things and working with the other instructors that were there, and that you and mom were there, and um, sounding out the sounds.
And let me give some background to the viewers too. So what Chloe was doing was a speech to print program. And that's just an easy way to understand versus other programs are print going down to speech. So all of the OG programs, all of the phonics programs start with letters first and go from letters to talk about sounds. So it's from what you see to what you're going to hear, from what you see to what you're going to hear. But developmentally, nobody reads in a language first and then speaks it later. And developmentally, our number one predictor of reading skills has nothing to do with the alphabet letters. The number one predictor of reading skills is a phonological processing skill called phonological awareness. And here's how you measure it. And folks who are watching, if you have a child who's 4 or 5 in the early ages, or a grandchild who's 3, 4, or 5, here's how you can check and see if they're at risk for having reading difficulties. Because we know from a big longitudinal study that getting this skill on board early is going to make sure that your child succeeds. And if the child does not have this skill at age 4, 5, and 6, then you are going to struggle to learn how to read in English. All you have to do is play a word game with the child. You say cat, and you tell the child, say it back to me. Say cat. And the child says cat. There we go. And then we say, okay, now let's change it. I'm going to say cat. And again, you say it, and then I want you to say cat. But this time, take off the sound. So say cat.
Cat.
Now say cat, and don't say k. Take it off. What's left? Yeah, and the child can just quickly say at. That's the child who's got that phonological system already working, because what's happened in the brain in that really simple task is extremely complicated. The child heard you say a word, and the ear gets a whole chunk of sounds mashed together. And then to say cat and figure out where's the k sound, they got to take that word and split it apart, figure out there's a k sound, or should go this way, there's a k sound, there's an a sound, there's a t sound. Like you say, take away k, and then again, then take the a and the t and put them together. But we can also do this with nonsense words, and it really challenges the phonological system. You can say, show me voop, or say voop. The kid says,
Voop.
voop. You can say, now say voop, and don't say p.
Voo.
So, voo. And they should stop before they get to the p. The name of this task is called phoneme elision. That means takeaway. The number one predictor of reading skills at age 4 is this phoneme elision task. And my companies spend a lot of time taking lunch to pediatricians. And we tell local pediatricians, look, if during the 4-year-old well visit, when they're coming in to get shots or just check their height and weight and whatnot, if you'll just take 2 minutes and play this word game with them, and in that 2 minutes, also ask the parent, anybody in your family history, mom, dad, aunts, uncles, grandparents, not a great reader, not a great speller, or ever diagnosed with dyslexia, or was told they're just not college material, they should become a trade, job, go into construction, be a plumber, be a this, that. Skills that aren't necessarily associated with having to go to college and do lots of reading. And what we know can happen, then the pediatrician's going to be better able to educate the parents of, we know that you're going to struggle, and we know that if you're going to have struggle, then you're going to have a better chance of early intervening. And if you early intervene, then the child probably won't struggle. And we want to be able to early identify. And here's the stats on the history. If the parent has any family history, one parent, this child's probably 50% more likely to struggle too. Because dyslexia, Chloe, who do you get to blame for your dyslexia?
Both of you.
Well, it's more on your father's side than your mother.
Yes.
Yes. Your father's side has a lot more history. So we'll give your mother a pass on that one. But if it's in both parents' side, then it's about 80% more likely that they're going to have a child who has some type of learning difficulty. And that's just the genetic probabilities that we're talking about there. So knowing that you're working on those skills or building that speech processing first, the intervention that Chloe was doing had nothing to do with the alphabet letters. It had everything to do with how the brain perceives sounds. And we know that the brain perceives the sounds, sure, acoustically, because you say them, but here's the fascinating research. There's a study done with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12-month-old infants. And they designed this really cool study. Dr. Lukowitz did it. And I think Dr. Lukowitz published it in 2012. And he had the baby and the parent face to face. And he had the parent speaking to the baby, hi, Chloe, la, 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 and just talking to him. And they had a laser eye tracker watching the baby's pupils. And that laser could tell where on the face did the baby look. And they found that at 2, 4, and 6 months of age, babies tend to look up here. It's kind of like a facial recognition. Who is that? Does that look like mom? Does that look like dad? Of course, you're also hearing changes of pitch of voice too to help make that determination. But we think that's part of what's happening. But by 8 months of age, the majority of the babies are like right here. They're looking at mom and dad's mouth, seeing what's happening there. They're watching it. They're trying to see. And when do babies typically babble? Babies typically babble around 8 to 12 months of age, which means they've been watching you, and watching you to understand what's happening there. How are you moving that mouth? So in a speech to print program, you go back to the visual parts of sounds, the acoustic parts of sounds, and also the oral, tactile, kinesthetic, or mouth movement, mouth touch parts of sounds, and you bring in some reasoning and thinking about it as well. So we also kind of call that like the Karate Kid experience, where the sensei was making the kid wax his car on this way and take the wax off this way. And the kid's like, this has nothing to do with karate. I'm not here to wax your car, because it wasn't clear what the connection was. With that now Foundations for Speech, Language, Reading, and Spelling program, which is what Chloe did an early version of back in the day, that's wiring what your lips are doing with what your ears hearing, with what your eyes seeing, with what we know about the sounds. And you're going to learn these very straightforward terms of lip popper, tongue tapper, tongue scraper, and learn how the sounds all go together. Because parents who are watching, your kids commonly mix up B's and D's if they're not really strong in phonological skills. And then some people are like, oh, let's do this and teach them B's and D's, or let's draw pictures on the B's and D's. That's great from a visual approach, but there's an easier way. Because when you say "buh," your lips come together and your lips pop apart. In the program you were doing, Chloe, they called that a
Lip popper.
lip popper. The scientific term for those who are speech therapists, linguists, neuropsychologists, it's actually called a bilabial plosive. It means two lips exploding air. So, but then they learned that lip poppers come in pairs. "Buh" is the loud lip popper because your voice box turns on. "P" is the quiet lip popper because the voice box is off. And we're doing this training with no letters at all, because Piaget taught us the brain learns concrete sensory experiences first, abstract things comes later. And there's few things more abstract than the shape of a letter. There's no reason why a B says "buh" and the B doesn't say "a," or the B doesn't say "e," or the B doesn't say "oo." It's an abstract symbol that we've learned in English. That symbol goes with this sound. Oh, but in German or in Spanish, the symbols have different sounds. And so the symbols really don't tell your mouth what to do. They're abstract connections. But once a child knows that "buh" is a lip popper, and they know that "duh" is a tongue tapper, they immediately stop mixing up the B's and D's, because you've made it more concrete to figure out, when I see that shaped letter, how's my mouth supposed to move? When I see that shaped letter, what's my mouth supposed to move and what's it supposed to sound like? And they've got 4 parts of the brain working together to build those skills. So you remember this much about mouth pictures, and guess what?
Mhm.
That's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to forget all that. Most parents don't remember staring their parents in the mouth. Sorry, most people who are readers don't remember staring their parents in the mouth, because that wasn't the real goal. The goal was the wiring of building the language skills that happen from watching the mouth and watching it move. Now, do you know why we think babies watch the parent's mouth?
No, because it's when the language starts developing.
It's easy. Language starts developing and they see movement. But I'm going to give an example with you of what we can do with the audience here is I'll make 2 sounds, but I'm not going to tell you if I'm going to make the same sound twice or I'm going to make 2 different sounds at a different time. But I'm only going to give you auditory input. So I'm going to take away visual, because I'm going to cover up my mouth. And if I say the sounds are, and the sounds are, let me do it again. Sounds are, same or different?
I think you have the background mute on, so there's no sound when you do.
Gosh, let me do it again. Sounds are. How about that? I got to get closer to the mic. And it's not always easy for the ear to tell, because those sounds sound a lot alike. But when I give you
I
visual,
can't tell.
right, when I give you visual plus acoustic, and I go sounds are, then we know, oh, they made an F sound first and a TH sound second. So we think babies are watching the parent's mouth move because it's starting to build their ability to control their mouth, get it to move in the right ways, and they want to start to speak. And pretty soon they start saying mama, or one of your friends' first word was truck, which is
Mhm.
unusual, dad, but they're watching the mouth move so they can figure out how to get their mouth moving as well. So the intervention you were doing was following the developmental hierarchy of rebuilding that phonological system here on the left side, rebuilding it from the visual, the acoustic, and the tactile kinesthetic of the mouth, and mapping those together. What do you remember about after first grade and after brain camp? What do you remember about going to school in grade 2 and reading?
In grade 2, I remember that I started off in this is when we started having different levels of reading groups. Um, and I started in the lowest reading group, and I was doing all right, but I kind of knew some more things than some of my other classmates at that point. There was one point that I clearly remember where we were learning about past tense words, about how you add ed. And there was a boy in my class who would pronounce them as ed. Like we would say inspired, and he would say inspired. And it would drive me crazy because I was like, that's not right. That's not how you do it. Um, but by the end of second grade, I was reading the chapter books. I had moved up a reading group level, and into third grade, I was in the highest reading group. And I remember we were reading the book Tuck Everlasting, and we were getting towards the end of it, and we only had one or two chapters left. And during our reading time, we were only supposed to read so many chapters.
Mhm.
I read the two chapters I was supposed to read, and there was like one or two chapters left in the book, and I still had more time. So I just kept reading, and I finished the book, and I went to my teacher and was like, "Oh, I finished it." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, I wanted to know what happened." And then I remember there was a discussion about possibly moving me to the fourth grade reading group because
But
I
wait,
had
you're in
finished
second
that
grade. How can a
third.
second grader, oh, third grade, how can a third grader go to the fourth grade reading group?
I had the skills to. I
Right.
had the skills at that point to be able to read, and I learned that I loved reading. I That was when I really started reading for fun, reading books on my own. I had a series of books that I loved, and I read all of them during third and fourth grade. And I think fifth grade was when you bought me my first Kindle.
Mhm. We decided that was a good investment to give you access to as many books as possible. And you remember the one rule we had about your Kindle and the books you had on it?
The rule was that I couldn't buy another book until I finished the first one.
That's right. We didn't want you to go on shopping sprees and keep
Mhm.
buying books. We wanted to make sure get it done, get another one, get it done, get another one. And you would read tons of them. And in your lifetime, can you remember how many Kindles you had?
I think I've gone through 6 Kindles now.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. I know it was close to 6, 10, whatever it was. There was a lot of them. And only one of them do I think you sat on and broke. I
Yes.
think the majority of them, what happened? Why did you have to have so many Kindles?
The majority of them just stopped working. I used them so much that they stopped working.
Probably the only dyslexic child I know that wore out a Kindle reading books on it because you had changed, your brain's wiring had been changed, your decoding skills had been changed, and you were no longer struggling. And you had got into that, what we call the love for reading.
Mhm.
And what that also means to us as a parent is you're learning more information, you're learning more vocabulary, you're enjoying more parts of expanding your knowledge base. It gives you a better chance to have, better success in academics down the road. There's so many positive advantages to giving a child really powerful literacy skills so that you just consume more information and you enjoy the reading action as well.
Mhm.
But for the viewers, I want to clarify one other thing. Because just because we changed your reading skills did not guarantee that you would have better comprehension.
Mhm.
So, speaking as the neuropsychologist again, we know the reading skills are up here on the left side. And it's part over here, a little bit over the ears, the phonological system, the mouth control part is up here. And these systems are working with part of that visual system to read those words, sound them out, memorize them, cite words, all that kind of stuff. But there's no guarantee that you read words, that you actually have comprehension. And unfortunately, many school teachers are being misinformed that comprehension comes after fluency. And I'm like, well, let's think about that. And here's a picture that makes us think about that. Where does comprehension start? Well, it doesn't start with reading. In this graph here, we see phonology, or the speech sounds of a language. Those are coming on board early on. As soon as you're talking to the child, they're building the knowledge of the sounds of their language, the sounds of words. They hear parents talk. And then around 6, 8 months of age, they're starting to babble too, and they hear their mouth making sounds. And so that phonology, or that phonological system, is one of the earliest building language systems. We think by about 6, 8 months of age, and this is why you can do American Sign Language or a baby version or a child version of sign language with your children, is that semantic system is beginning to come on board as well. And that will then begin to help build concepts, build imagery, and understand the meaning of words. So to clarify for folks who's either they are educators or they're having educators tell them that comprehension comes after fluency, that doesn't match with how the brain develops. The brain builds comprehension skills in the spoken language system and the listening language system for years before a child actually learns how to read. If you have weaknesses in listening comprehension, almost a guarantee you're going to have weaknesses in reading comprehension. And in fact, there's one study, that shows if you compare reading comprehension to listening comprehension, and if somebody's listening comprehension is way up here, really strong, but their reading comprehension is down here, that's another way to identify dyslexia, because they must be struggling to read the words and it's interfering with their comprehension.
I was going to say that I think one of the reasons that I got so much stronger in 3rd and 4th grade with reading and enjoyed reading so much is that I did the foundations between 1st and 2nd, and between 2nd and 3rd grade, I did the visual imagery program.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So what Chloe's talking about now is we knew that we had changed our phonological system, and that should give you better access to meaning and words. But to make sure it's really as strong as possible, that Now Programs Company and the MorrisCenter.com clinics have a second program that's not for the left side. It's more for this right hemisphere of the brain. And it's actually really building these imagery skills. How well can you hold on to pictures? How well can you read a book and visualize the character, the scene? And you can zoom in, and you can pan out, you can fast forward, you can rewind. And you've got all this mental control of using imagery for comprehension. And parents, this is a really, really powerful system. You don't necessarily have to put your child through an imagery training program. You, as your own parent, can be guiding your child to say, here's what I'm picturing when I think about, what we're going to do today on our Saturday. And you kind of give an image of, we're going to go to the store, then we drive over here, and you're kind of describing a movie. And by parents talking about your movie in your mind, talking about what you're picturing, you actually are now modeling for your child how they can be making movies, and that they actually can make movies. Some children, some teens, and even some adults don't know they actually can control and work on and build better efficiency with movie making. So Chloe, then you went into that second program that built imagery, because now we've got reading, but we want reading plus comprehension. One other thing I want to mention about this graph is on the left side over here, you see expressive language skills. And on the right side, you see receptive language skills. And the whole bottom half of this graph below age 5 and down, those are all speaking skills. So all parts of language build as a spoken language system first. And up in the middle, now we have reading. And then the harder skill is spelling. It's about 100 times more difficult, for the brain to do than reading is. And then you get the writing skills of composition and sentence structure. And then last, we get to this foreign language that's actually called math. And if all these spoken language skills have been developing properly, and that visual systems have been developing properly, then these written language skills aren't so hard to master, and it won't be so difficult. But we know that we've got to build those phonological skills first. Now, Angela has a question. She says that she's surprised that as an early literacy educator herself, she never really thought about the connection of sign language being part of a lesson. We encourage sign language the most with infants, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 12, 14, 16. And usually when you do sign language with infants, you're dropping it off by age 2 and 3 when spoken skills really start ramping up even stronger. But you've accelerated the growth of that language system by doing sign language. You've decreased the frustration because the child can now communicate their wants, their needs, and they can interact with you more explicitly. And you're not guessing why they're crying, because they don't need to cry. They can say to you, "I want milk. Give me milk. I want to eat milk." Or they say, "Please" or "Thank you," and that's the system we want to build on first. What's more important for dyslexics is we want to be sure they're getting that phonological skill from our speech to print first, because we know that's the stronger approach to build better reading skills. The phonics programs are not as effective. They're important, but that's not where you start. And in fact, in one of our studies with 5-year-olds, we showed that if you give 5-year-olds phonics, or you just give them extra one-on-one time doing what their classroom teacher does, or you give them no treatment at all, and these 5-year-olds came to school with the bottom 12% on their early language skills, like their phonological skills, that phonics is no better than nothing, is no better than extra one-on-one time. So for 5-year-olds, there's clear evidence that phonics is not the appropriate place to start. It's that speech to print piece where you're actually working on the phonological skills from that neurodevelopmental approach. And that's why the Now Foundations program starts at age 5. We can begin to build the speech processing first before going to the reading spelling. So that's going to be a bigger piece. Second, then, is to bring in the imagery skills. And the imagery skills, whether the child with dyslexia is listening to a book or listening to a person or talking to somebody, the more we build those imagery skills, the more we're going to advance the comprehension system. But imagery skills and comprehension by themselves do not fully guarantee accurate reading. So we want both systems equally strong. So Chloe, what do you remember? Well, let me back up. Do you know what happened at your school after your principal and your first grade teacher saw you go from bottom of the class in first grade to the top reading group in second grade, when they were sure they were going to be calling me in and saying, "Look, you should have listened to us. It hadn't clicked yet. She didn't have the reading skills." And instead they were calling me in and they're saying, guess what they said?
How did you do this?
They're like, "We think we want to put this in our school. We think we want to give all kids what you just did with Chloe. How young can we do it?" So we told them, actually, you can start this in pre-K. At age 4, we can begin to wire this phonological system with this Now Foundations program. And so we did a contract. We used their Title I money, and we helped them get teachers trained in using the program in the classes in pre-K, K, and first grade. Do you know what your first grade teacher did about her education after she saw your rapid growth in literacy skills? Because she said to me, in 20 years of being a first grade teacher, I have never seen a child go from bottom of the class to top of the class over the summer. They weren't even in school. How did that happen? Guess what she chose to do?
She went back to school, and I don't remember if she got her master's or she got a doctorate.
She got her master's degree, and she
And
got her
she wrote
master's
her
degree.
thesis.
She got her master's degree in literacy, and she used that Now Foundations program with her first grade class the next couple of years, and she used the data she was collecting from her kids to show, look how much better my kids are reading. Look how I don't have kids that it's not clicking for. And there was a phenomenal example of how much educators can take really evidence-based knowledge and even contribute to it, add more science behind it, add more skills, add more degrees and training. And she had really taken it on herself to do evening class, weekend class, and build her academic prowess with a master's degree and even more expertise with that Now Foundations for speech, language, reading, and spelling program. So you helped have an impact on a whole school by showing them what it looks like that they could get at the bottom of the class and go to the top of the class.
Yep.
How about in grade 3 when you did the imagery? What do you remember about that?
So before, I remember in second grade struggling with imaging, and there was an event that happened where I had a hard time with imaging numbers, and they really wanted us to start doing mental math.
Yep.
And there was a number line on our desk, and I would use the number line. My teacher didn't like that because she wanted me to use my visualization, and so she took the number line off. And so I started using my fingers. And then she was mad that I was using my fingers and told me that she was going to cut them off, which is not great for me. But I think it also helped you guys realize that I needed more with visualization. And doing that program, we started with like one sentence. It would be like, Jack saw a black cat. and then the steps are to start at the top. So we start with the first thing, and that's Jack. And what does Jack look like? Well, Jack is a young boy. He has brown hair. He wears a red shirt and some jeans and black shoes. And so I've gone from the top of him all the way down and described the what he's wearing, the color of it, um, how he looks in my head so that you can have the same picture. And then we go to the cat, and it's okay, it's not a kitten, it's a cat, it's an adult cat, and it's black, and it's sitting on its bottom with its front legs straight. Now you have the exact same image that I do.
And so then you've got the details, and it's all
Hmm.
coming together. And so, yes, really important piece is you're building the imagery, you're building the skills, it's coming together. And I was looking up here at some of your test scores because we had you formally tested at the end of 2008. That was more than a year after you'd already done the interventions. And then we picked up some work we wanted to do to work on imagery, how to use imagery for math. And you did some testing again in 2010 just to check in, see where things are at. And I'm looking at your 2010 testing and your 2008 testing. In 2008, most all of your literacy skills were 65th percentile or above, whether it's spelling, writing, written expression. And in 2010, most all of your literacy skills are more like 87th to mid 90th percentiles and above. And the reason being is because we knew that your IQ was up around the 90th percentile. So the aim we want all parents to aim for is not grade level. Many parents don't understand that grade level just means you're at the 30th percentile. Well, only 30% of kids have IQs at the 30th percentile. 70% of them have IQs that are higher. So most parents should see their children reading 1 or 2 grade levels above because that's 50th percentile and above. So the goal is get these skills up to the child's IQ level. And then you've got, like, Chloe's got a Ferrari level brain. It's highly engineered for superpower. And now the reading skills are at that same level. And the spelling skills are at that same level. And then we had to build your comprehension skills at that same level and take the math skills at that same level. So you were on track for a diagnosis, which you had of dyslexia, but also dysgraphia, because that was a spelling and writing, and then also dyscalculia, because that was the math and struggles. Later, you were identified with ADHD. Then we picked up on the sensory processing disorder, which is coordination, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. And then we picked up also on an oral dyspraxia, because you would overpack your mouth with food, and you would choke yourself almost every meal. And your mom and dad are like, okay, how do we help get this across? You bite, you chew, you swallow. You bite, but it wasn't happening. She's like shoving food in, and we didn't realize that you didn't have the registration of how full was your mouth, and the coordination of the teeth and lips to eat is actually pretty complicated. And back then, more so than today, although it's not perfect for you today, and actually not for mine either, you still sometimes aspirate liquids. And that
I did it
means
this morning and then had to explain to someone because they were concerned for me that I'm okay. That
yeah,
is normal for me.
and
And
aspirate
that I
liquid.
used to pack my mouth as a child.
That's it. And what the aspirating liquid just means is the tongue and the inner parts of the mouth don't always sense the cold liquid coming back fast enough and get that airway closed off, so the liquid goes down the tube to the stomach, not down the airway to the lungs. And so those are all skills that you got extra intervention for. You did extensive OT work. And today, what have you chosen as a career?
I have chosen to be an occupational therapist.
And when did you graduate, young lady?
I graduated last December.
So this is my proud dad moment. My daughter took it on herself. And not only did she excel in her literacy skills because of early intervention, but she also did dual enrollment in high school, which means she went to a college campus and took college classes and high school classes simultaneously. And you actually got your AA degree before you got your high school diploma, which always to this day still just blows my mind. Like, that's not supposed to be possible. And then you went to undergrad starting as a junior. So you then only had to do 2 years of undergrad to finish your bachelor's degree. And then you went
Mhm.
straight on into master's degree, finished your master's degree. And so now at age 24, you have your master's degree, you're an occupational therapist, and you've chosen to work in whatever area of OT you want to work in because you had the choices, you had the
Yep.
skills, And that's the point of this Dyslexia Success Stories podcast. We want to raise the bar on what parents think is possible for dyslexics. Folks are just saying this nonsense like dyslexic brains work differently. They have superpowers. You're expecting too little. You're acting like their brains can't have more superpowers in reading and more superpowers in spelling. And none of the research backs that. All the research says that whether you're 6 or 66 or Richard Branson at 70 something, it's not too late to take the reading skills and make them stronger. It's not too late to take the spelling skills and make them stronger. But what makes the biggest difference is what program are you getting and has it been scientifically tested and proven to be effective? That's called evidence-based. Don't take these secondhand terms like evidence aligned. There's no such thing as evidence aligned. It's either been tested and proven or it's not. Evidence aligned means we took something from something that's evidence-based and we're using it by itself. There's no research to back up that's going to work. You took a piece
Something
out of it.
something really interesting as well with along the lines of the evidence-based practices, like they push it so hard in OT school of that if
Mhm.
you're going to do an intervention, it needs to have evidence behind it that it's
Right.
helpful and works for this condition. And one of my classmates was actually a elementary school teacher, and I remember hearing her say that she had chosen to leave elementary school because she was so frustrated with the fact
Mhm.
that none of it was evidence-based.
Right. And it is. We have a very huge dichotomy, and people wonder why there were reading wars. Well, it's very simple. There's not penicillin wars. There's not, stroke wars. I mean, all of the healthcare professions are driven by evidence-based practice. And if you have to test it and prove that it works or not, that's physicians, that's speech therapists, that's OTs, that's psychologists. Those are the evidence-based healthcare fields that are required to be evidence-based. And if you're to be a physician and you see the child has all the symptoms of strep throat, and you either A, give them A, prescribe vitamin C, or B, you've mixed up a new concoction of chemicals that you think is going to help treat strep throat, that's called medical malpractice. You're actually putting that child at risk by not giving them something that's been highly tested and explicitly shown to be very effective. In education, we still don't have that requirement, even for a reading program. It's ludicrous. There's no reason why we don't require that every reading program in the country has to be tested by randomized controlled trials to figure out which one is the most effective, because you can find a program that is most effective. Teaching reading is actually not as complicated as designing antibiotics for a bacteria like strep throat. So to think that we can't use randomized controlled trials to guide education is completely foolish. If we do that, then we have a chance of drastically changing literacy, drastically changing their outcomes. And right now, today, education is still what we call an ideology and philosophy-based profession, which basically means what I think and what I feel is all that matters. And we're not giving our teachers the right tools to help them be as successful or as effective. If we didn't give pediatricians antibiotics, guess what? A lot more kids would die. But because they've been given these really powerful tools, it's the person plus the programs that makes the biggest impact. One phrase I really cringe when I hear educators champion is, it's the teacher that teaches the child, not the program. Actually, it's not true. It's both. You want the really knowledgeable teacher, and you want to give them the most effective program known to science that exists today. And when we do that, we get more Chloe Ellen Conways who don't struggle to read and spell, excel through school, don't have years of failure experiences, years of frustrations, have happy, healthy demeanors, have good psychological mental health, and can go be very productive members of society. And
Yes,
now,
if I've told you before that if I didn't get an intervention when I did as a child and wasn't in this family, and didn't have parents who knew how to help me, I would have continued to go to maybe I would have been held back, continued to struggle,
yep,
maybe gone to second grade, continued to struggle, and I would have just hated school. I would have been struggling every single day.
yeah,
I would not have any confidence. I would think that I was stupid and definitely wouldn't go to college and probably possibly even not finish high school.
yeah, absolutely. All of those are true. All those are well documented, in addition to other horrible outcomes of going to prison, going to jail, committing a crime, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, depression, anxiety, and worst statistic ever that's connected to dyslexia is higher likelihood of suicide.
Yeah.
And so all our viewers, we implore you to push for, ask for, find evidence-based literacy programs that have been scientifically tested, preferably by what's called a randomized controlled trial, and proven to be highly effective. Because don't expect less of dyslexics. Their brains can rebuild and change skills and make strengths in spelling and strengths in reading, just like anybody else's brain can, because you're talking to two people right now who are both dyslexic, and we both got intervention early. I actually got it at age 5 because one of my older brothers couldn't read at age 7. And so both Chloe and I are living, breathing examples of the outcomes of highly effective early intervention. I think that's all we got to say today, Chloe. Any last minute comment you have for parents and families that you want to share with them before we close?
One thing I wanted to say about the Now program and the research that it's based off of and everything is that I love that it's based off of stroke rehabilitation, of that rewiring of the brain, and that it goes right along with rehabilitation of any deficit. When you have an injury to your hand and it's not working correctly anymore, we start at the basics. We start back at the pinching grasp that babies start with. Everything starts back from development, and that's what the whole program is based off of, is how the body typically develops and the steps that it takes.
I think it's a great point. And let me throw one other caveat, because one pushback I get from parents and educators more than anything else is, yeah, but we can't afford it. So, well, actually, you can't afford not to have it. And the Now Programs company, full disclosure, I own it. I built it. I ran it for 10 years with no salary, no income, no shareholder deductions, nothing. I just reinvested the money back in the company. Today, the Now Programs company, or nowprograms.com, can do contracts with your school. And we will push in high fidelity, expertly trained people in the program and deliver the services to your child for free in the school. We have ability to have contracts in South Carolina, North Carolina. We're working on Hawaii right now, Texas. All of the Boston City Public Schools have the access to actually contract with the Now Programs company and get services to your children for free. We're working to get more contracts with more states and make more things available, because we have a team of over 100 online instructors. Sometimes we scale up to 150 or even 200 instructors, depends on how many contracts we have. And we want to make sure that you have access to the most effective, high-powered literacy intervention there is. One last caveat is we've also built an app.
Yes, I was going to talk about that too. I was going to mention that there's the app, and it is the cheapest way right now to get this phonological based program of where there's the mouth pictures on there, and it talks about calling the lip popper and how your lips are moving and what sound it's making. It's perfect for 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, I believe.
And even some 3-year-olds are able to play it as well. But also parents might say, look, I can't afford the app. $7 a month is more than my budget can handle. And for some folks, that's true. But guess what? Your school can buy it. And your school can buy it in the US. And if they buy it through an Apple partner, an educational partner bulk discount, your school can buy that app, and it only costs the school 50 cents a month per child. That's right, 50 cents a month per child. Your school can buy lipletterland.com. I had a school yesterday download 300 copies of it. So we're looking to download 500, 1,000, 3,000, and every copy that gets downloaded can actually help 4 kids. But it's priced in such a low price point because the goal is, this is the early literacy app. It's not a reading app. It's the early literacy app that builds the neurology of that speech language processor that drives more success with the reading programs. So we love having this app available. It's our lowest price point piece, and it's our biggest global piece. It is available worldwide. And even if you're not native to English speaking, doesn't matter, as long as you can understand and figure out how to play the app. If you wire the neurology for the speech processing of English, it's the same neurology, what we call it's the same language engine your brain will use for your native language, whether it's Spanish or German or Russian or Asian, any of those languages that you're working on, building that neurology of that speech language processor gives the brain that power to use on any language in the world. So more opportunities, more possibilities. And Chloe Ellen, it's been a real pleasure having a father-daughter chat with you about the science of reading, the science of nowprograms.com, and the power of giving a child the ability to choose their own future. And you've done a phenomenal job of that. And we look forward to empowering other kids in other places as well. All right, folks, you're welcome. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another dyslexia success story. We got so many of them coming because the Morris Center has been open for 39 years. And we've helped thousands of patients at the Morris Center. The Now Programs company has been open for 13 years. It's got thousands of students all over the world. It's been empowering online. We have students who are online from India, from UAE or Jordan or Saudi Arabia, students in Malaysia, Singapore, students in the Netherlands and the UK, students in Canada and all across the United States. And we want to have you have the opportunity to make sure your students don't struggle, make sure your children don't struggle, make sure your grandchildren don't struggle, because the earlier we build literacy skills, the stronger and better the outcomes are going to be. Thanks again. And next week we'll be online with the Dyslexia Discussions Talk. That's our 5 p.m. podcast every other Friday. Have a great weekend. Thank you again, Chloe Ellen. Your dad loves you, and we'll see you soon.